Welcome out to episode 7 of Drake's Dungeon. Joining me today is going to be our art director, Santiago. But before we get into that, I just want to say a couple things. With everything going on in the world right now with COVID-19, there's a lot of uncertainty, and hopefully players are finding that War Commander is going to be a place where you can sit back, relax, have fun, and enjoy your times. And we're going to be here for you during this whole thing. If you haven't taken advantage of it, right now we currently have an offer every day in the game where we're giving a free repair logistic token. So please redeem that every day. It'll just go ahead and help you out in playing a little bit more. Our new units that have come out this last month have been the Absolver, the new Sentinel unit. That unit is a beast. If you haven't got your hands on it yet, I highly suggest that you do. And coming out this week, actually, by the time you hear this, it'll have just recently come out, will be the Outback, our new defense unique unit. This truck with a tank mounted on the back of it is one of our coolest looking units in the game, and I'm really excited for everybody to get the chance to get their hand on it. Very powerful. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the man, the myth, the legend, the person who has designed so much art for War Commander. And when I asked the community who would they like me to talk to next, they all said, we want to have you talk to somebody who's an artist. So all right, without further ado, here is our art director, Santiago.
Hey Drake, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. One thing that our players love is the art, and I kid you not, I know you're not really on Discord, so you don't see it a lot, but players ask, can we get the art for this? Can we get the art for that? Can we get the art for this? When they know that a new unit is coming out, they are so excited to see it. So I'm not sure if I've done a good enough job of communicating to you how excited people are about the art that you guys create over there.
That kind of warms my heart a little bit because we do put a lot of work into this, and needless to say, like the game is actually like it's an older game, so it definitely like minimizes the amount of work that goes into the units once the units come out. So it's kind of cool that you get to show like the higher resolution sort of content.
No, and we actually have every month on the forum, we have a place where I put all the art in its own forum post, and on Discord we have our own channel that is just devoted to the art, which are very popular channels. You are the art director. Can you tell us a little bit about what that role really is in the company?
Okay, so company-wide, I'm an art director for multiple games. So I'm on Battle Pirates, War Commander Rogue Assault, and of course what we're talking about, War Commander. What that means is essentially I am in charge of anything involving art in general, like visuals. So user interface, as in buttons, menus, all the things you click on the game pretty much, and whatever gives you stats or things like that. And anything visual like maps, buildings, units, effects, animations. Yeah, pretty much anything that has a visual on it, I'm involved in it. I am not the one, however, who creates every single asset. Actually, nowadays I create less assets than I used to create in the past because I used to be a lead artist. Now I'm an art director, so like my time is busy like helping people essentially. So I pretty much facilitate things for the artists so that they can create what we need. I come up with the ideas and the concepts of like the realm of the visuals for the different factions, visuals for the different games, how we're going to communicate certain things in the games. I give them a plan of action. I make concept art. I work together with other concept artists as well to create like better content that then I can communicate to the artists, and then they put it together and we ship it to you guys.
Very cool. Very cool. So yeah, you're the art director now, but you used to be the lead artist. So you've been designing art and units for War Commander
7 years.
Yeah, 7 years. Wow.
I think so.
Wow.
Yeah, I think I'm coming to 7 years.
Wow, you've been here as long as me. That's crazy.
Might be off by a little bit, but yeah, somewhere around 7 years, 6.5, 7 years.
We are like the old men of Kixeye.
I actually started in San Francisco working as a entry-level artist.
Okay, and then moved your way up?
Slowly moved my way up. Yeah, like essentially, I got lucky. I got dealt some like good hands where there was vacuums created where they needed someone to take charge, and I just offered like, I want to do this, and they let me do it. So here I am.
Well, you've been doing a great job for years. So, what kind of things inspire your designs? Like what goes through your head when you need to make a new unit or a new piece of hero art or tech or anything like that?
So I was thinking about this. It's a bit of a tough question because each game has their own way of communicating everything, of course, and the inspiration is drawn from different places depending on the games, the games that I work on, of course. So when it comes to War Commander, however, most of the inspiration, of course, is military. But then War Commander has its own lore. It has its own story, and its way to that the people in this like sort of realm interact with their environments and what they have available. Most of my inspiration comes from the military, but then I try to go towards the War Commander side, where you have a little bit of a distant future, but they're still using old technology just in a sci-fi-ish way, though not necessarily the pure sci-fi where you go into like spacecrafts and stuff like that. You're still like have that gritty sort of feel to things. I would say I take existing concepts and try to bring them into like what would be the chances once we take this new technology that we have today in 200 years from now. How can we use that? So like I'll give you an example of what I mean because it might be a little confusing. So things like the Kraken unit. So I try to think like, okay, so we have military weapons that can concentrate lasers on different things, right? And we have particle accelerators that generate this crazy amount of energy, like by clashing particles, right? So, but that like nowadays, a particle accelerator is like the biggest machine we've ever built. That's like the size of a small city. Um, if you take that 200 300 years in the future, let's say we were able to like really really control that energy, so we can make that into a small device that is like a small particle accelerator. And we have the Kraken weapon, like the weapon that is on top of the Kraken. It would be like a tiny accelerator that manages to concentrate enough energy and pushes it to the different targets, right? So the general idea is essentially grabbing something that it's possible, taking it into a sort of like dream realm where like, okay, we dominate with this technology. This is how we incorporate it. Then there's also the factions that have their own ways of engineering and their own ways of building their like having their construction, the way that they go about their constructions, the way that they go about the aesthetics of their units. Those things are involved in here. So for each of those factions, I have different places where I draw inspiration from based on the subjects. I could run through the factions if you want.
Sure.
So essentially, I'll start with the simplest one, with the most straightforward one, as the survivors. So the survivors are essentially this group of people that were taken advantage from by like other factions. And so I started thinking like, okay, so they all come from this sci-fi-ish sort of technology background, but they're building things from scraps because that's what's left behind in the battlefield. For all of you guys who like all of the people who don't know how the survivors came about, like they were originally like people who managed to escape from the Sentinels, sort of brainwashing. I don't know what they were doing to people. They essentially had them incarcerated and were torturing them. That was sort of like the lore that I got from it. So essentially, I try to think like, okay, so if you have this kind of group that is in the eyes of the other factions, these guys are a rebellion. They're not really like this prestige survivors to the other factions. The other factions, they're like rebels, right? So like, okay, let's militarize them. Let's make them like very rebel military. Like they take scraps, they take things from around the environment, I guess, and convert them into their own sort of makeshift machinery. But it still has to be competitive, and it still has to hold against the other factions, right? Who have like a lot of technology. So a great example is the Outback, the unit you just mentioned. I'm glad that unit is about to release because I didn't know if I could talk about it or not.
Oh
I
yeah.
didn't make the Outback. I like received a lot of inspiration from some of our teammates, which is great. And then I just pushed the design. That was it. Like it was actually an easy job for me, but it was an amazing job by our artist Leon, and she she really did a great job. So essentially, the concept of it is like I imagine like a tow truck driver. So like this guy used to be a tow truck driver kind of thing on his past life per se. right? And what would he bring to the battlefield? So I imagine, like, what if he just strapped a piece of a tank to it and just uses that to shoot other people, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
we took the tow truck idea and we strapped the tank, the classic old school tank on it. We changed the barrel to make it look a little more modern, and graffitied it all up because like it's survivors, so that's what they do. They leave stuff behind and it gets graffitied up and rusted and stuff. And we wrapped it around with chains, and like, there you go, you got a survivor unit, right? Um, there's also units that are a little more traditional, like some of the aircrafts are more like you can see the full aircraft, like you don't have that makeshift feel where they grab pieces from all over the place, but then you have like the graffitis and you have the rust and you have like broken things, which makes it more like it's like, kind of like scraps, but they're competitive, it's competitive scrap. So that's the survivors essentially. You can tell that I draw a lot of inspiration from things like Mad Max. Road Rash actually has come about a couple times. Just things that have like a gritty kind of like raw feel. And materials are like very rusty and old and left behind, kind of thing, like street art sort of stuff. For the Sentinels, they're like the flashy guys. These guys are like the, because they're like the most aesthetically concerned, in the sense that the Sentinels are like this religious faction, like they're all about their machine gun, sorry, they're all about their machine god, and they're always trying to, like, the way that I picture them is like, as any religious group, they're trying to recruit, they're trying to get more people, and they're trying to show their brand. This is what we're selling. So all their units are white and flashy. They because they have that pyramid sort of logo, so they'll use that pyramid shape everywhere in their vehicles. Wherever they can have triangles, they will have triangles. Wherever they can put their logo, they will put their logo in there. Make sure that, like, we're here, kind of thing. And if you see their units, they're all big. They're all very, very big. They're like a big billboard every time.
They spend a lot of money on car washing supplies, things like that.
They're kind of like, well, the way that I see it is they're kind of spread the kind of like what different religions say, like spread the message, kind of thing. They're trying to spread their god, and trying to recruit more people and just show themselves as a powerful faction, kind of thing. And then when it comes to, so you can say, like, well, from them, I actually took a lot of inspiration from the Egyptians, because they were very, very obsessed with shape and how they communicated power and being strong. So they use a lot of like very solid shapes. Like there's a lot of there's a lot of pyramids and a lot of cubes in Egyptian art in general. I try to look at different religious groups, and mostly powerful ones, I would say, like the larger ones that manage to get more luxury, I guess. Because there are a lot of religious groups that are like a lot more humble, per se. So they won't show off their stuff as much, but like, yeah, I won't mention any religions, but yes, like I use some different groups of religions to the way that the Sentinels show off their brand.
Yeah, kind of can inspire how we portray them.
Correct. But I'll jump onto Corpus, the Corpus faction. So the Corpus, I would say, is the more traditional one, in the sense that I draw inspiration for the Corpus from modern military or modern security companies. So they're very much about business. Their units will use a lot of inspiration from modern tanks, which weirdly, modern tanks are very basic looking. Like they don't usually put that much aesthetics into it. It's pretty much a cube. They reduce the amount of detail. They reduce the amount of information that goes on them. What the Corpus bring to the table is they have their weird technology. They're the ones who are pushing the envelope when it comes to technology. They have all the most sci-fi technology, I guess, but then that sci-fi technology is mounted onto more classic looking things. So a good example again is the Kraken, where you have a tank that's very similar to I forgot the name, but it's one of the most powerful modern tanks there is, and it's very classic looking. It's very possible. Essentially, it's a plausible tank. But then you got the particle accelerator little piece on top, which is definitely off.
Yeah, that's a little new.
Yeah, exactly. So there's things like that, or their aircrafts. Their aircrafts will use bodies that are from really modern security company references that I found. And then we'll use like the electricity sort of boost in the engines. So they'll have this, instead of having the regular rotors, they'll have this energy propellers per se and things like that. So those guys are more like take real cutting edge technology and then add something that is way off in the future on top of it. They're the high tech guys. They're very straight to the point. They won't have as much about their aesthetics. They're more about like, we're gonna kill you.
More about function over fashion. There's a lot of folks out there who like to create art for fun, and I'm sure they're kind of curious. What kind of tools do you use professionally to make your art? Like any certain programs or any certain tablets or anything like that you like to use?
So I'm a 3 monitor person. I like our artists use between 2 and 3 monitors. Usually 2 is enough. I like having the third one, so I have a place to work more like normal work, as in because I'm on different teams and I run like different departments on each. So there's a constant flow of information going back and forth. So I have 1 monitor that's just dedicated to that, to actual like just me communicating with people and solving problems. I have another one where I look at my reference. If you're an artist, please don't work without reference. Don't think you know it all. Even if it's not reference, use it as your inspiration or something that is there that influences how you portray what you're painting or sculpting or what you're doing. It is very important to not just use your brain and like your memory. Use what's available to you. You'll trust me. You'll make way better art that way. And then the other screen is where I actually do my modeling. Most artists use a drawing tablet. So that'll be a tablet that you have a stylus or a pen-like thing, and you can draw on it, and things appear on the screen. In my case, I do a lot of 2D painting because I have to paint these ideas for the artists. Like, this is what we're going to be making. This is what you're going to be making. It helps us sort of get them to do things faster in a way because they have an idea, a clear goal of what they're going for. I use a pen display. So think of it as a monitor that you can draw on, and it reads pressure, tilt, and like the different flows that your hand will put on a normal graphite per se on a paper. So those are my tools, and my mouse, of course.
Right.
As far as software goes, most of my day happens in Photoshop. But we use, for War Commander, we use Photoshop. We use Autodesk Maya for modeling. You could use 3ds Max as well, but none of our artists seems to want to work on 3ds Max. So yeah, we're all on Maya. And what else do we use? Well, we have some like in-house tools for making the sprites and other more like technical stuff. But as far as creating the art, all you need is a tablet, a mouse, at least 1 monitor or 2. Yeah, Maya or Photoshop, depending on what you're trying to make. If you have Maya, also have Photoshop, please.
Okay. That's good to know. You see, I'm a horrible artist, so that actually helps me, like that breakdown kind of helps me because I kind of just assume everything is just Photoshop.
There's no such thing. I don't think necessarily horrible artist. I think it depends on the context. So if you're making art for yourself, so self-expression, or just to show, like, here's my product, you decide how that looks. It doesn't need to look like anything, if that makes sense. It could be strokes on a piece of paper, but then there's a certain flow that you like, something that you're communicating. Like, so art is just a communication medium. So you're just communicating like either a feeling or an emotion of some kind. Well, it's the same thing, really, but you're just communicating something on your canvas, whatever medium it is that you decide to use. I'd say you could define, I guess, bad art or good art when it comes to doing it professionally as for a product. So kind of like in the case where you're working for a game and then you make something that just doesn't really match the game at all. So let's say like if we're making a tank for War Commander versus a tank for, if you're going to make it for Call of Duty per se, that wouldn't really read very well. Because War Commander's camera is totally different. It has a totally different set of rules. You need things to be readable. There's there's context for you to draw from to say like this is objectively good or this is not, this is objectively bad.
Hmm.
Well, if you make your personal art, this is just your personal art. People either take it or they don't.
Hmm.
A good example is Cubism, Picasso's Cubism. So like he was originally a normal, fully fleshed traditional artist, where like he was so good at doing portraits and insane still images of like different scenes and things like that. But then he decided to develop his own style, which is based on circles and squares and triangles, basic shapes with basic colors, and they're very flat. But the guy's a master of composition. So
Hmm.
he knows where to put those circles and those triangles pretty much and make them look like the best circles and triangles you've ever seen.
So
Yeah.
anything can be art as long as you really know how to do what you're doing.
Well, as long as you, I guess, like, I would define, like, personally define it as if you have a target, that's pretty much all it takes.
Hmm.
As long as you have a target, like something you're trying to communicate or not communicate.
Well, what has been some of your favorite art to make? Like you've done so many things for the game over the years. Do you have any favorite things that stand out as like the ones that you're most proud of?
Yes. This is probably the more complex answer I'm going to give you here. I am very drawn to fixing problems and like problem solving in general as an artist. So what does that mean? I enjoy more than just making a cool piece. I enjoy figuring stuff out, like figuring how are we going to communicate this in this section of the game that belongs to this faction that will do this, and this is how it's going to interact with other things. So how do we solve this issue? Like how are players going to relate to this thing and understand that, like, okay, this is a sentinel unit, and not only is it a sentinel, it's a sentinel unit that does a lot of damage, but then it's also going to communicate that it moves fast just by looking at it. It's also going to communicate that it's very weak as far as like armor wise, things like that. Uh,
Hmm.
that problem solving I find really fun. I decided I was going to list a couple of different projects for you.
Sure.
So I say one of my favorite ones because at the time, like I wasn't very agile at 2D painting. Well, I mean, professionally, I could paint professionally, but not as agile as a traditional concept artist, because those guys are really, really, really good. I can get the same results, but it'll take me a month where it takes them a couple of days. One of the first projects that really, really got me to think hard was the portrait heroes.
Hmm.
So for the portrait heroes, I originally tried to communicate the idea to the artists, but the first portraits that came about were not necessarily there. They were not communicating the right thing.
Hmm. They were a
Um,
little more cartoony, a little bit. Not
yeah, they
cartoony,
felt
but
cartoony, and
yeah.
they didn't seem to have a clear. This is the kind of people that we have. They were more like, here's something cool, and using the colors of our faction. So a good example of that, and I am gonna regret this, but it was the portrait that was made of me. It was me on Corpus, surrounded by Corpus things, but it didn't really communicate much of Corpus per se, as like the
Hmm.
personality of the hero. Because here you're not selling a unit, you're not selling a faction, you're selling an individual within a faction.
Hmm.
So it was a different story. So what I decided to do is like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and paint one portrait per faction to show the artists, because the one thing is me telling them, and the other one's me showing them like, this is what I want you to aim for.
Right.
So
Sure.
the first one that I did for that project to try to show guys how to go about this portraits was Martin Sentinel. Yeah,
Yep.
he's a Sentinel portrait. I'm the envoy hero. Absolutely, yes, yes, sir. So with this, well, so first we established with the Sentinels, because they're this very organized, very structured religious group. They're also militarized, very structured, and very organized, essentially, people. So what I try to think is like generals. Their heroes would be generals, would be people in command, right? And would be people who would inspire, like, I guess, receiving orders from, in a way, or either that, or like at least fear in some way, in a serious way. So I started looking at old general pictures, like These people who used to commission paintings of themselves, like looking royal, sort of thing, and over everyone else, and being more important than everyone else. And you notice like simple things as their posture, like the way that their chins are up, the way that they don't look away from the camera. Well, at the time, artists, I guess, they look straight at the camera with like
Like
sort of,
piercing eyes. Yeah.
yeah, correct. Like they're very 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 strong looking in that sense. They're confident. So if you look at his, the corners of his mouth are tense, or in a set resting position, but they're tense. If you look at his eyes, you can see all of his iris. Um,
Mhm.
Showing like his eye is like really really focused on you. I had like this strong lighting where like it's very dark on one side and very light on the other, just sort of like to draw your attention to that area. So like he's looking at you, he's got you on side, kind of thing. And then
Mhm.
if you see his eyebrows, like his eyebrow is like tense. And every unit that you see for the sentinels will be the same idea. These are chin up guys. They will be dressed up in a nicely strong looking suit. They will be looking at you, and they're all under a lot of
Right.
stress, so about to snap, kind of thing, and kill everyone in the room, sort of deal. that
Yeah.
that was sort of what I was picturing. So this guy's like every sentinel portrait that you see, you're gonna notice this. That there's a guys not to be messed with, sort of thing. They're very confident. They're military leaders more than personalities in a sense, and they're very serious and they will snap. You don't mess with them, sort of thing. That was
Mhm.
that's how that went about. And that's probably my favorite portrait to make. It was really fun because it was a really clean portrait. Then let's go with the more neutral one. That's the Andrew. That's a corpus unit. The corpus unit. What I mean by neutral, and it's not necessarily, it's not in a bad way. It's just the corpus. Remember that these guys are like security guys. So this is
Mhm.
the Black Waters guys, right? This is the guys that they're working. They're professionals in their field, but they're not invested past that. They're working their ass off. They're really hard workers, kind of thing.
Mhm.
So the Andrew unit, what I wanted to communicate with, like, this is a guy who's really good at driving his tank, right?
Mhm.
Um, so I suited him up with high tech armor, and his face looks a little more tired, a little more like a normal human. Um,
Like he's
but
seen some stuff. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But he has seen some stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly. So he's like your, let's say, like your special forces dude who has a family at home, but he's here doing his job, and it's terrifying, kind of thing.
No, players have actually commented in Discord that it looks like Andrew's dead inside.
Yeah, exactly. There
Yeah.
we go.
Yeah.
You got it right.
Yeah.
Um, and with the corpus units, there, I wouldn't say there's no. It's not always the same personality type. I would say that is something you find in the Sentinels. The corpus will drive like some personality, like units, for example, like the portrait that we made for the Len unit.
Mhm.
So Len is, I believe, he's the controller hero.
Leonard is the not the controller.
Cerebrus,
Controller's yeah, Cerberus. Yeah.
Cerberus.
The
Sorry.
the basically the controller is the survivor version of the Cerberus,
Yeah.
kind of. So yeah, they're very similar.
So
Yeah.
Len is the Cerberus, and he's also a corpus unit, and he has a little more attitude in that sense. He does look a little more alive, but he's still like, he looks very human. Like he's really good at his tech. So is this guy that I thought of it like a San Francisco kind of dude.
Mhm.
And he has his tattoos. I didn't make this portrait, by the way. I just gave direction for this one. I did make Andrew, and I did make Martin. But the idea is that, yeah, that they feel a little more human, a little more relatable, but at the same time they are badasses in their fields. And then the final portrait I'll talk about is so on the survivor side is Malcolm unit. That was the most challenging portrait I've done. I spent a lot of time working on this guy. So the survivors, I would say, are the faction with the most personality because they don't come from a common ground. They're common. What's common between them is how they all survived. They all survived depression, and now they're bringing their personalities into this group. So each individual is very, very out there about their personality in a way. So you'll
Mhm.
see a lot of like very scary people, kind of like the Rick Hero, like that guy, like he's beaten up and he looks kind of like a beaten up hobo that you probably don't want to mess with. He's a psycho in a way.
Right.
You got units like Kyle that like his evil laugh. Anyway, so the Malcolm was so that was going to be the sniper for the survivor. So I started thinking like, how do we go like overboard with the whole sniper theme? So let's think he's a hermit. He lives in the woods. He will kill everyone. No one will ever see him or know his name or anything about him pretty much. I started thinking Radagast from Lord of the Rings.
Right.
So
Right.
this
I
guy
mean,
who lives in the wilderness, he's part of it now, kind of thing.
yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, is he wearing a ghillie suit or is he actually wearing the wilderness? Like, that's the question.
The idea was that okay, so this is what came through my mind as I was making it. I don't know how much I communicated this. Like, of course, I try my best to communicate that through the art. But the idea was that this guy is he had his ghillie suit, but like it's like years and years of adding more stuff to it. So if you see parts where his ghillie suit show, they're broken and they're old
Right.
and rotting away. Because it's been there for a long time, kind of thing. And then there's like all kinds of different methods of making a ghillie suit. So like you'll have grass and leaves from different environments, not one anymore. He's just like part of everything, kind of thing.
And I didn't
Also,
notice until now that he has a dead eye as well.
yeah, the dead eye was part of that one was just a funny thing in a way. Like I was trying to think like some storytelling. He's a sniper. Like you have the thing where snipers like close one eye. Um,
Right.
and I'm like, well, what if his instead of like I was originally gonna give him a patch, and that was part of his commitment. Like his
Right.
commitment to being a sniper is like always having one eye closed. But then I'm like, what if we just give him cataracts? Like
Yeah.
we just mess his eye up and give him a scar. Like I thought that was a cool detail. Like he's like he just has to do this now. This is the perfect job for him now. A little cool touch is the person who we based this off from. He is really into survival and all this kind of stuff, and he really likes Vikings. So
Mhm.
one tiny detail I dropped in there is on his right shoulder. I'm almost sure it's on his right shoulder. There's a little Viking sculpture of one of the Viking hammers.
Oh yeah, no, like a little Thor's hammer. I never noticed that
Yeah, there you
before.
go. And
Yeah,
it's based off a real Thor's hammer that he has.
that is cool.
Yeah, I thought that was like an interesting touch. Yeah, so that was that the survivors. I would say like those are the portraits where you find the most diversity because you have that guy, like I said, you have Rick, who you can tell like he lives in the streets, but you don't mess with him, kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, you have units like Mikey, who's like a crazy psychopath with Tesla coils around next to
Like the
him.
mad
He has
scientist thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
he has the electricity with him. You have Kyle, like I said, that is all about fire, and he's like laughing about it, watching he's gonna watch the world burn and things like that. But yeah, so that's kind of how it goes about that. Those three portraits, I would say that project I counted as one of making the portrait for Andrew, Martin, and Malcolm. That's gonna count as my first one favorite project was making those three because I had to think about like how do we storytell on each of the factions, what kind of people join each of the factions.
Hmm.
Aside from that, I would say the technical was the first unit I made for a specific faction, trying to describe that through the units, the same storytelling through the units. It's a little simplistic, but it definitely shows it has a different kinds of metals. It has asymmetry. It has this makeshift feel. So that I would say that's another of the favorite units. And then I think I might, and like I said, like I am more into the solving the problem, which goes pretty much in line with what my job is, more than did the final piece look cool on its own? It's more like did it look cool for the game, or did it look cool for the lore that we're trying to fit it in? Like I don't mind if we're doing pixel art or super highly detailed art. Both of them are equally as challenging. They just have to be approached in very different ways, which is very much in line with what I do for a living.
Right.
what my position is. So I would say so those units, and then when it comes to like modeling actual units, for me, hard surface is really fun. I'm gonna not say a unit, but I'm gonna say instead engines.
Hmm.
Whenever there's an engine, like a component that is an engine, I like. Well, I used to just like drop in right away. Like I want to do that kind of thing. I would save those for me if possible. So yeah, we had a couple engine components. Don't remember their names exactly, but I will share them with you so you can share them here. But
Sure, sure.
yeah, we have a couple of engine components that I loved modeling, like all the little wires and little connections and little random devices that engineers put on these things are like super cool to me. It's just like challenging shapes, and they have a lot of information in them. So I would say
Yeah.
that's probably my favorite art to make in the games is that is
Right
engine.
on. That's really cool. I'll tell you right now, Santiago, this has been the longest podcast we've done.
I'm
But no, 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 no. This has got some really cool information because honestly, when I'm asking these questions, I was expecting informative answers, yes, but I wasn't expecting like the depth of how much like character thought and obviously you're an artist, but the amount of detail that we don't even see in a sense because it's behind the scenes of what goes into these things is very insightful, very cool.
But that's the challenge in a way. Like if you don't notice, we did our job.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because it feels so immersive in a
It
way
feels
that
right.
like
Yes,
yeah.
and it's been really hard on both of our like older games. It's been really hard with like Battle Pirates and War Commander to once you've made 200-300 tanks, how do you make another one that speaks for itself?
Right, right.
Um, and I've generally done more than that. so,
Yeah.
so I don't know how many tanks and how many units I've done. Um, so it gets really hard. And then also trying to communicate that to the art, like nowadays that I'm not the one who makes the final tank asset, trying to communicate what the artist, like the new artist should do. Like they do an incredible job, I think.
Mhm.
Especially like I don't know how they manage to like listen to me and actually understand what I'm trying to say to them. Because a lot of times I just tell them verbally. Like a lot of times we don't have time. We have a very fast paced pipeline, so like we have to work incredibly fast. Um, and there's a lot of things that I would like to do to make their lives easier, but unfortunately, like this is the way our jobs work, kind of thing. So a
Mhm.
lot of times I just tell them verbally, like this is what I want you to do, and somehow they make something badass out of it. like,
The amount of times that I have looked at some art while I'm putting together a briefing or a unit spotlight for players, the amount of times I've looked at art and I'm like, this is cool. Like to be able to say that a game that has been around as long as ours to still have art that comes up where I'm like, this is really cool is quite a thing to say.
yeah, it's a tough one. So with time, like because it's been, I believe, War Commander is 8 years old now, almost
I
nine.
think I think we're 9 going on 10.
9 going on 10. All right,
I
so
don't even know anymore.
I
This
didn't start as an art director, right? I've seen multiple art directors. I started as an entry level artist, as I mentioned, and everyone, like every art director is trying to do their best with what they have, right?
Mhm.
So this is of course like a game that has a lot of rules already in it because it's been around for so long. It has some technical limitations because it's been around for so long, and it has so many initiatives from art directors and artists trying to implement like this is the mood that we want to show here, or like making little adjustments. Like they make the best decision that they can with their knowledge. They go like, I think all units should be smaller
Mhm.
because of blah 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 reasons. I'm not doing that, by the way. I'm the opposite side. I want them bigger.
Right.
But there's only so big that you can go. Like after, like it'll get funny if we go any bigger than we are right now. But yeah, there's so many initiatives going on in there that like it makes it really hard for you to find a middle ground when you're creating assets. Like when you get in there, like when you're like putting in front of all these assets, because there's thousands and thousands of assets. When you're placed in front of all this stuff and go like, okay, find a way to unify them, but you still have to keep all of them because the game depends on all of them.
Right.
It's pretty hard. You can't just like go in and say like, okay, I'm gonna make the art style this style. Like I'm gonna make this art style now because this is what I like. It will
Right.
look like a collage if you put that in the game. It will not work. It will not look right. It will look out of place. You need to make things that sort of consolidate and help everything else to stand out, even if it's not the same art style precisely.
Well,
So,
you and your team have been doing a great job.
thank
And like I said, you guys were the number one requested. Somebody from the art team, get somebody from art on here. We want you to talk to somebody about art. So, thank you so much for taking the time. And listeners, if you can't tell by the two doorbells that rang and maybe the groaning of my dog, due to COVID-19, we are all working from home as well. So thank you for bearing with the reality of the world. Somebody delivering a package to me, I think, at my doorstep. So I appreciate that. Hopefully, like I mentioned earlier, you guys are all staying safe and keeping yourself and your loved ones safe from harm. But I would just like to say again, Santiago, thank you so much for taking the time and
you for
and
having me.
being here. This has been one of the coolest kind of behind the scenes podcasts that we've done. So I think players are really going to appreciate it.
Thank
Uh,
anytime, really.
yeah, thank you. I will be back next month. New episode, a new member of the team to talk to. In the meantime, as always, thank you for playing War Commander. Bye.